There are a few scenes from Chungking Express that I never stopped thinking about. One in particular is Fei Wong breaking into a stranger's apartment and slowly rearranging his life, swapping his soap, replacing his fish, cleaning his bottles, and all the time he has no idea any of it is happening. And so she is absolutely not doing it for credit, she's just doing it because she wants to. And somehow that's the most romantic thing in the film. So, a few weeks ago, I rewatched one of my favorite films, Chungking Express. This is a film that I've always loved a lot, being from Hong Kong. I mean, I love representation, jokes. But something that has always stood out to me about this film is the fact that the people in it feel so real. And not in the way that it's relatable or that I mean, I guess it is relatable, but not in the way that they're portrayed really realistically, but rather so they just feel like they're living. And whilst you might be like, whoa, big deal, yes, it is a big deal. Because I feel like in an era where everyone is performing on the screen, and even in real life, I think everyone is usually performing, whether it's for an audience, for an algorithm, or just to be a version of yourself that you want to be perceived as. It's very rare to see four characters introduced by Wong Kar-wai doing the exact opposite of that. Now, this is not going to be a movie analysis like I did in my previous video. I know it's been like a year, but regardless, better late than never. I'm back. Yeah, but overall authenticity and this subject has just been something on my mind recently, and so I did some research, and upon watching this film, I really wanted to talk about it online because who doesn't? So I'm mostly going to be using this film as more of a reference point. I'm mostly going to be talking about authenticity, what it means to me, and what I have derived from my research. And to do that, I'm going to be talking about two key philosophers. The first one being Rousseau, and the second one being Lionel Trilling. Before we get into the fancy French lingo, we're firstly going to talk about Rousseau's foundational understanding of the world. That's a bit broad, actually. Foundational theories. So, to Rousseau, humans existed in something called a state of nature before society happened. And in the state of nature, humans just are creatures, and they're very simple. They live to eat, sleep, reproduce, and repeat. And because of the simplicity and the lack of community, our main motivation was something he coined amour de soi. Sorry, I was like stuttering because I was prepping myself for that moment. And to Rousseau, that roughly translates to the love of oneself without comparison. And what this means to him is that we're not eating or feeding ourselves to perform to someone. We're not doing it so that we can be better than someone. We're just doing it because we kind of have to. And for Rousseau, this is consistent across most of his theories. He believes that society is kind of the root of human corruption. And in relation to what we're talking about today, he thinks that because of society, people started living together, and so that means you can be seen. And when someone is being seen, they can be compared. And suddenly there is a difference between the fastest or the slowest hunter, and there's going to be a difference between the smallest and the biggest hut. And from here, our key motivation now turns into something Rousseau coins amour propre, which is a comparative self love. And this is the type of self regard that requires other people to ratify it. However, it is important to note that Rousseau doesn't argue that amour propre is inherently evil. I mean, if you think about it, it is the engine behind a lot of human achievement. In art, science, and even civilization itself, people do incredible things because they want to be seen as having done them and be recognized. However, Rousseau's warning was that when this kind of self love is inflated, that is when it turns harmful. Because instead of living for yourself, you start living for others. Every action gets filtered through how you think you'll be perceived, and then your value that you assign to yourself starts coming from external validation rather than from yourself. As Rousseau puts it now became in the interest of men to appear what they were really not. He recognizes the split between the self that you actually are and the self you appear to be. This idea will then be picked up on by Lionel Trilling in 1972 when he writes a book called Sincerity and Authenticity. So, in his book, he defines two key virtues. The first one being sincerity, and that is the precursor to the second one, which is authenticity. Sincerity, under Trilling's framework, is to behave honestly within an assigned social role. So, think of a medieval knight swearing an oath to his lord. Being sincere just means that he keeps his oath and that he doesn't lie about it. What sincerity asks of him is to be truthful to the role that he was assigned, as I said prior. And it's not really asking him who he is behind the role is who he is. On the flip side, authenticity assumes that beneath all the social roles that you have, there is this deeper self that doesn't quite fit into any social role predefined for you. And authenticity demands that you live from that deeper self, even if it contradicts the social roles that you've been assigned. So let's say I'm in investment banking, but I absolutely hate it there. That's me not being authentic because that's not me being true to myself and what I actually want to do. So this is where a lot of people's understanding of what authenticity is, and a lot of people stop at this point. However, there is a further argument to this, and Lionel Trilling actually talks about it in his book. A caveat that a lot of people fail to recognize sometimes is that when authenticity becomes a value, or when it becomes something you're trying to achieve, it stops being authentic. Because authenticity, by definition, cannot be performed. The minute you're trying to be authentic, you've installed this audience in your head that compares you against the standard of what you think authenticity really looks like. Okay, history lesson is over. How is this relevant in the modern day discourse? So what really sparked this whole curiosity within me is because I've been seeing a lot of posts, whether it's on TikTok or Substack recently, of people talking about how to be authentic and people defining what authentic is. And a lot of these posts are arguing about being authentic is to embrace your cringe, to be embarrassing, to be vulnerable, or whatever. So one piece put it like this: true authenticity isn't about being effortlessly cool. I swear my posture's awful. It's about embracing the embarrassing, showing up messy, being vulnerable, and saying what you mean. When we give ourselves the chance to be genuinely awkward, to overshare, to confess, to bite our tongues or admit our failures, we acquire a certain strength of disarming the scrutiny. Now, I get the appeal. I think there is something real to this, and it is speaking to a lot of people, so I'm not discrediting it for what it's trying to say. A lot of people pleasers who have been suppressing their true feelings and learning finally how to express them, I think that is true growth to authenticity. But I also think this view is overlooking what authenticity truly means against the philosophies that I had researched, at least, because it falls directly into this trap that Trilling talks about. To me, ultimately, authenticity isn't a behavior. It's not about being messy or being cringe. I feel like those are just behaviors, and behaviors can be performed. After reading up all about it, authenticity is a property of why you're doing something rather than what you're doing. To put it into the context of, I guess, the piece that I was reading, you can be authentic and messy at the same time, but you cannot be messy to be authentic, if that makes any sense at all. Whilst I did preface in the beginning that this is not a movie analysis, I did bring up Chungking Express at the very start of the video because I feel like this is one of those films that doesn't have a key takeaway nor a defined plotline. So when an audience walks out, they usually feel slightly confused and full of conflicting emotions. At least for me, it was feelings of warmth but also emptiness at the same time. When I first watched it, I didn't really think about it because I was young, dumb, broke. I still am. And looking at analysis on the movie, I just assumed that it was a film about loneliness, and that's why I just felt so empty and so confused. But now thinking about it, I think that warmth that I was feeling was coming from the fact I thought the characters were just so authentic, because I don't see a lot of films portraying characters like that. And I don't see a lot of people in modern day being like that either. The characters are constantly in each other's spaces, even if they don't know it. But they don't perform for each other, and they don't perform for themselves. I mean, Faye blasts the same song on repeat at the snack bar, and she even breaks into the cop's apartment to slowly change his life, whilst the whole thing is being done to avoid being seen. And so, we know that she isn't doing it for credit, nor is it even a gesture that she's privately proud of. She just wants to do it because she thinks she likes this guy. And the alluring part for us watching is that nothing about the act is for anyone. On the flip side of this love story, the same cop talks to a bar of soap. And the thing that is important here is that he's not doing it to be quirky. It could even be actually very embarrassing for him as a cop to be doing that. But it's just what processing grief looks like for him, in his own apartment with nobody around. On the flip side, the other cop spends his days collecting cans of pineapple that expire on May 1st, hunting for them in shops like his life depends on it, where the workers are visibly confused about why anyone wants nearly expired pineapple. And this ritual exists in the gap between him and the world that doesn't see what he's doing. He never really explains it, and the film never really explains it. So we see the act, and we just have to live with not really knowing. And I think that is the actual point. I mean, none of these gestures are ever translated into legible motivation, and I feel like the film refuses to tell us why it's happening. Like, we're never explicitly told much about the background of a lot of the characters, nor are we told explicitly that it's a metaphor for something or a coping mechanism, but I think it's the opacity that protects the characters. I feel like anytime a film explains or feels the need to have to put context behind an authentic gesture, that authentic gesture becomes a device with a function. And Wong Kar-wai's refusal to actually explain these gestures is what makes it feel so authentic. And I'm sure everyone who is watching that movie or who has watched the movie has private little moments like these. I mean, small private actions that have no audience to witness, or rituals and habits that only mean something to us. Walking out of this movie, I think the warmth that I was feeling comes from remembering what it feels like to really own something that was truly my own and just act it out with no audience. And the emptiness comes from realizing just how rare it is to see that in practice nowadays, with social media being so omnipresent. Now, to close. Authenticity is not something that you can perform. You cannot try to be authentic. Rather, it is what is left when you forget you're being watched, including by yourself. And so, to be authentic is to be invisible. First to everyone else, and then to yourself.